Today we are going to explain thriller and fantasy movies. Now let's start it. This girl had committed such heinous crimes that she was mummified alive and sealed in a cold stone coffin, music, and buried deep in the earth. But after thousands of years, fate took a turn and people unknowingly dug it out of the ground. As the coffin was exposed to light again after centuries, suddenly a flock of crows swarmed around. They were making such painful screams, as if predicting the coming of death. This horrifying scene had not even ended when those crows, music, attracted by some invisible mysterious power, started following the transport team. They started hovering around the helicopter like shadows. Till some time ago the desert sky was completely clear. But suddenly there arose a rare and terrible dust storm, music. This was clearly a sign of some major disaster to come. Although everyone found all this very strange. But no one had time to pay attention. They just wanted to load the coffin onto a transport plane as quickly as possible and escape the scene so it wouldn't be caught in the approaching storm, but the troubles had just begun. The plane had not even taken off properly when it was engulfed by a dust storm. Luckily, the plane took off and headed for its destination just before it was swept away by the waves of sand. But was it really luck, since that coffin had been unearthed from its grave? It was as if the shadow of a sharp object was hovering over the entire team. Will, who was closest to the coffin, music, was bitten by a spider inside the tomb. After which his condition started deteriorating. His pupils began to roll upwards uncontrollably and he soon became unconscious. Nick had no idea Will, music, was in this condition. He was then engrossed in listening to Jenny's translation of the inscriptions on the coffin, music. Jenny was telling him the story of the princess who was imprisoned in the coffin, whose name was Aminette. Nick, music, was lost in her thoughts when suddenly his eyes fell on an eye carved on the coffin and his mind again got lost in a terrifying hallucination. Then a loud noise woke Nick. When he turned around, he saw Will standing near the coffin, possessed by a shadow, frantically cutting the ropes that tied the coffin. When the colonel who was nearby saw his strange behavior, he scolded him, music, and asked what he was doing. But Will attacked them with a knife without saying a word. Nick tried to calm her down, music. But Will turned around and attacked the colonel again, this time killing him. He then started moving towards Nick and the others with a knife in his hand. It was as if he had become addicted to murder. The soldiers immediately pointed their guns at Will, music. But no one was able to muster the courage to fire a shot inside the pressurized cabin. If one shot goes wrong, music, and the cabin body explodes, no one will survive. Nick quickly snatched the gun from a soldier's hand and told everyone to remain calm. But Will seemed possessed by some devil. He also attacked Nick. Only then did everyone realize that Will had turned into a terrifying devil. People kept shouting warnings at him, music. But it had no effect on him. He had completely lost his humanity and lunged at Jenny to kill her. Nick is forced to shoot, music, to save her. Even after being shot, nothing happened to Will. He continued with the knife, music, without any pain. Nick was horrified and fired again. They were just beginning to understand what was happening. Then the plane got a big shock. As if someone had kicked him in the air. Music, Nick ran to the window and saw black smoke coming out of the plane. The engine had failed. They ran to the cockpit, music, but even the experienced pilots were perplexed. Because they couldn't understand how the plane had gone off course. The plane staggered into the skies over Britain, music. Where suddenly thousands of crows made a suicidal attack on the cockpit window. The glass, music, crackled like spider webs. Before they could send a signal for help, something like a black cloud appeared in front of the plane, music. On closer inspection, it was discovered that it was not a cloud but a flock of millions of crows that were colliding with the plane at high speed. Both pilots were killed on the spot. In this sudden attack, the C-130 Hercules aircraft went completely out of control, and the root of all this was that 5,000-year-old mysterious control. Due to continuous attacks by crows and technical faults, the plane started breaking down. The plane was falling towards the ground and the intense air pressure started pulling everyone out. In a last-minute attempt to save Jenny, Nick unthinkingly puts on the only parachute, music, and pushes her out of the plane. While he himself fell down with the plane, music, to his death. Jenny survived but was immediately called to the mortuary to identify her loved ones. A very scary thing happened there, music. In the silent morgue, a dead body suddenly sat up. He tore the shroud and pulled himself out. That was Nick. His survival even after falling from a height of thousands of feet was no less than a miracle. Nick himself was surprised, music, how he was alive. Then he got another shock. Will, who he himself had shot, was standing there, music. Nick almost wanted to ask if he was dead. You're not dead, but you're going to be in a situation worse than death, Will said coldly. In fact, after being bitten by the spider, Will had become a wandering soul. He came to warn Nick that he was now a victim of the god of death. Nick was still in disbelief at what she was saying, music, when Jenny and the others entered the room, seeing Will's spirit disappear. All three of them were stunned to see a dead man standing alive. Nick looked like he was seeing a ghost, music. The truth was that it was in that ancient tomb that the mummy had left Nick and Amrita mark, the mark of the undead. Now unless the god of death himself wants to take Nick's life, music, Nick couldn't die even if he wanted to. Music, the rescue team immediately rushed to the crash site upon receiving news of Nick's survival. There was nothing there except debris and dust. But then his eyes fell on the mysterious, music, coffin which had fallen and broken in two parts. Ice-cold air wafted from the coffin, music, fragments amidst the eerie cawing of crows. One rescue worker could not contain his curiosity and removed the lid of the coffin. Inside lay the ancient mummy wrapped in bandages. That man unfortunately became the first victim of that devil after 3,000 years. Music, when his friend heard the scream and reached there, he saw that his friend had turned into a dried-up corpse, a dry mummy. He ran away in fear but Mother caught him. Music, in just a few seconds, he absorbed all of her life essence. With the sacrifice of two people, that dried-up mummy was now slowly coming to life, music. His magical powers were returning. With his voice he brought back to life both the dead people who had now become his slaves. These were the first two, music, soldiers of his immortal army, the undead army. Jenny couldn't believe that Nick didn't even have a scratch after falling from a height of thousands of feet. Nick himself found all this very strange. Seeing Nick, music, confused, Jenny finally reveals her true identity. She wasn't just an archaeologist, music, but part of a secret organization whose job was to eliminate supernatural threats from the world. Jenny explained that they had been searching for an ancient dagger called the Soul Blade, the Blade of Set, for years. There was a princess in history whose name was erased from the records. Princess Amenet, in her greed for power, made a deal with the god of death, Seth, and killed her own father and brother. She wanted to bring Satan into the world but was caught and buried alive as a mummy. The dagger's hilt was set with a large red gem called the Death's Eye of Seth. If this gem is attached to the dagger and a human body is used as a medium, then the god of death can descend on earth. This gem and dagger were separated by the Crusaders centuries ago. Recently, during the excavation of the metro in London, a large grave was found where that gem was hidden. Following this clue, they reached the tomb of this princess. They accidentally unleashed a catastrophe that could destroy the entire world. To Nick, it all seemed like a story. Then he saw Will's spirit again, beckoning in a corner, music. He followed Will into a bathroom, where Will told him a harsh truth. Will said, "Nick, you survived that accident not because God saved you but because we both are cursed." Will explained that when the coffin was being lifted into the mausoleum, the eyes on the coffin were looking directly at Nick, music. The first man Mom saw after waking up was Nick. So Nick is chosen as a vessel container for the god of death. If that princess sacrifices Nick with the soul blade, music, the god of death will take over Nick's body and wreak havoc on the entire world, music. Nick was shocked to hear this. Then suddenly he saw his mother and a group of rats coming towards him on the road. He ran in fear and narrowly escaped being hit by a car on the road. Jenny took care of him. It was all a hallucination, music, from Nick. To prove his point, Nick took Jenny back to the scene of the accident. On the way, near an old deserted church monastery, Nick felt as if someone was calling him. Jenny said they should head towards the plane wreckage and the two separated. As soon as Jenny left, Nick was left alone. The princess hidden in the darkness had already made him her target. Before Nick could understand anything, music, a powerful shadow grabbed him. His consciousness was lost again in a desert illusion. When he regained consciousness, he found himself in the ritual hall, the sacrificial hall of that church. There the princess's slaves chained Nick to a cold altar. Then Princess Amunet jumped on him. After killing many men, she had now largely returned to her human form, and Princess Amunet had now regained her former beauty, music. She was watching her chosen prey, Nick, with rapt attention. To test whether this body is worthy of handling Seth, the god of death. Satisfied, he decided to begin the ancient ritual. Without delay, he smashed a sacred statue standing in front of him with his fist and took out the soul blade hidden inside it. A mana net began reciting ancient spells so that Nick could be sacrificed. But then he got a big shock. The precious red gem, the ruby a euro, music, on the hilt of the dagger was missing. Without that gem this sacrifice was incomplete. Amunet was still thinking about what to do. Just then Jenny arrived there. Jenny was stunned to see that living mummy. Nick yelled at him to run. Jenny ran for her life but was helpless against the princess's speed. The princess grabbed Jenny to suck her life force essence. Meanwhile, Nick took the opportunity and kicked those mummy slaves back and freed himself. He quickly picked up the dagger and attacked the princess. Jenny took the opportunity to snatch the dagger and ran away with Nick. He started a truck and from there it became 921. On the way, Jenny understood why the plane had crashed near that church. Actually, the Crusaders had hidden that dagger in the statue of that church, and the magical power of the princess had pulled the plane there through Nick. Jenny warns Nick that the princess will try to capture him again because he is the chosen one. Nick continued to say in his arrogance that he was not under anyone's control. But then a miracle happened. The truck turned on its own and started heading back towards the same scary church. The princess was indeed controlling Nick's mind. Their truck overturns due to an attack by the pursuing mummy vampires. As Nick regained consciousness, he saw the princess coming towards him through the mist. In anger, Nick picked up a stick and went to fight the 1,000-year-old witch. But the princess blew him away in one blow. Just as the princess was about to finish Jenny off, out of nowhere, crystal arrows began raining down on her. A modern and well-armed secret force arrived there. He knew the princess's weaknesses. They tied the princess from all sides with hooks and chains. Before Nick could ask anything, he was given an injection to make him unconscious. When Nick woke up, he found himself in a high-tech lab. There were parts of strange monsters kept in jars. There he met Jake, Dr. Jekyll, music, who had been researching these dark forces for years. Dr. Jake reveals that Jenny is part of his secret organization, whose job is to protect the world from these demons. The princess was tied up in heavy iron chains in the middle of the lab. To keep him under control, he was being pumped with mercury, because the ancient Egyptians knew that mercury blocks magic. Dr. Jake's plan was that as soon as the temperature dropped to 28 degrees, the mercury in the princess's blood would freeze and he could operate on her and discover the secret of her immortality. Then, despite being imprisoned, the princess made eye contact with Nick and pulled him back into a trance. This time Nick felt not fear but a strange sense of familiarity. The princess whispered in his ear that Nick's previous life, past life music, was the man chosen by the god of death. She begins to seduce Nick again. A Mononet began to whisper in Nick's ear. He promised that if Nick allowed Seth, the god of death, to enter his body, he would have immense power to rule over life and death. Not only this, the princess herself will become his better half and together they will rule the entire world. Music, this dream was so captivating that anyone could get lost in it. But then the princess screamed with the sharp pain of the mercury and Nick's illusion was shattered. Nick's heart melted and he asked the doctor to stop, seeing which doctor. Jake understood that there was a deep mental connection between Nick and that mummy. Meanwhile, the team digging in the London Underground finally found the red gem. Upon finding the gem, the princess imprisoned in the lab realized its power and a devilish smile appeared on her face. Jenny, music, also understood the truth. The doctor hadn't intended to save Nick. Nick felt the ground slipping from under his feet after hearing the doctor's real plan. The doctor wanted the princess to sacrifice Nick so that the god of death would enter Nick's body and then the doctor could kill that god. That means the princess will give the dagger. Nick will give his life and music, doctor will take the credit. For Nick, it was a well ahead, ditch behind situation. He was going to die anyway. In a rage, Nick attacks the doctor. But then the doctor's other personality, music, the devil Mr. Hyde, comes out. Nick was badly beaten. But at the last moment he, music, injected the doctor with an anesthetic. Meanwhile, the princess used her magic powers to summon a small spider. Music, that took over the mind of a control room employee. The employee shut down the mercury machine and cut off the electrical system with an axe. As the temperature rose, the princess's strength returned, music. He broke his chains and kissed the guards present there, sucking the life out of them. Now she was a fully formed powerful monster, music. Nick and Jenny realized that if they didn't destroy the red gem, everything would be over. They escape the basement, but Princess is heartbroken and furious when she finds out Nick is leaving her and running off with another woman, Jenny. He exerted all his strength and summoned the dust and storm of the Egyptian desert to the streets of London. The sky turned black. Glass buildings started breaking and thousands of people started running to save their lives. The princess was now out on the streets like a ferocious predator. She wanted to establish her new Egyptian empire in this new era. Nick and Jenny were running for their lives amidst the debris and dust. While from behind the princess's wrath was turning the entire city into ashes. This scene was no less than a catastrophe. That terrible sandstorm had now turned into a giant face, ready to swallow the entire city. People were running here and there to save their lives, but that dust storm had spread to every corner. Then Nick's dead partner Will reappeared. He showed Nick and Jenny a secret passage. But they hadn't even taken 3 steps when an out-of-control, music, bus crashed into them. Nick quickly pushed Jenny aside and saved her, but he himself got stuck inside the bus. Luckily, he survived and Will told him that the gem was hidden in the Crusaders' tomb. Meanwhile, the team from the archaeological department received news that Princess Amunet had reached there. With her magical powers, the princess brought back to life the thousands of years-old corpses present in the tomb. Even modern weapons proved useless in front of those immortal soldiers. The soldiers who were killed also became mummies and started kneeling before the princess. The princess finally acquired that death-high red gem, music, and set it into her dagger. Now the dagger was complete. All that was left was to sacrifice Nick. Will, who had actually become a pawn of the princess. Nick, music, brought him straight into a death trap. Nick rescues Jenny from the clutches of the mummy in the dark alleys of the tomb. But they could not escape the trap laid by the princess. Music, a shadow pushed them into a tunnel of cold water. Before Nick could do anything, the princess pulled Jenny underwater and drowned her to death, music. As Nick, distraught, approached Jenny's corpse, the princess emerged from the darkness. He said in a cold tone, "It is certain that humans will die. These bones are useless. But if, music, you join the darkness, you can even control death. Nick shouted and refused. He was devastated by the death of his girlfriend. Music, but he didn't give up. The princess, in a rage, broke Nick's bones and beat him mercilessly so that he was forced to his knees. Then Nick noticed the dagger. He cleverly snatched the soul blade from the princess's hand. He tried to break the gem by hitting it on the stone. The princess screamed. Wait. If you break it, you will never be able to become a god, nor will you be able to bring anyone back to life. To make alive. These words struck Nick like lightning. He thought if he became the god of death himself, maybe he could bring Jenny back. He pretended to give the dagger to the princess, but at the last moment he stabbed it into his own chest. This was the last step in that terrible ritual. Nick's body began to ache. All the dark, music, power of the gemstone was absorbed into his blood. The gemstone faded and Nick's eyes changed, music. There were now 4 pupils in his eyes. Bekub was no longer a human being but had become Seth, the god of death. This god, music, who rose from the dead, shattered that dagger. Now Princess Amunet was overjoyed because her 1,000-year-old dream had come true. Nick, now death personified, slowly moved towards the princess. Just as he was about to kiss her, his eyes fell on Jenny's cold corpse lying nearby. Seeing Jenny's lifeless body, the sleeping person inside Nick suddenly woke up. On one hand, the power of Seth, the god of death, wanted to take over Nick's body, while on the other hand, Nick's own willpower was fighting it. Everyone thought that evil would win. But then came a big twist. Actually, before stabbing the dagger, Nick had created a crack in the gem by hitting it on the stone, due to which the power of the god had weakened. With his steely willpower, Nick imprisoned that evil shadow in a deep corner of his mind. Princess Amunet felt that her god had awakened. But all he got in return was a powerful attack from Nick. Now Nick had the power of death, which was beyond the princess's power to defeat. Nick pinned her to the altar and sucked out every last bit of life she had left in her with a kiss of death. That princess of thousands of years once again turned into a dried-up lifeless corpse. Nick then approached Jenny. Now he had the power to raise the dead, music. He let out a terrifying roar and the miracle everyone was waiting for happened. Jenny's breath returned. She came back from the jaws of death. But this musical wasn't a happy ending. The makeup was no longer human. The shadow of Seth was forever ingrained in him, capable of driving him wild at any moment. If he had stayed with Jenny, his dark powers would have harmed Jenny and the world would have considered him a monster and taken him to the lab to be dissected. With a heavy heart, Nick left Jenny's side. Before the rescue team reached there, Nick disappeared like a shadow into the depths of the tomb. He disappeared from the eyes of the world, as if it never existed. Meanwhile, Princess Amunet's body has been recaptured by music Dr. Jack. He was again sealed in a heavy coffin and filled to the brim with mercury for safety, so that he could never raise his head again. At the end of the story, music, we see that Nick is no longer alone. He is accompanied by his friend Will, whom Nick has brought back to life with his powers. Like a dead shadow, both of them now set out on horseback across the vast dunes of the desert. Music, Nick now has powers that can both save and destroy the world. He has now become a dark hero who will guard the world from the shadows. Thanks for watching. Kindly subscribe my channel for more exciting videos.